Welcome back to the Daily Mastermind, and welcome back to the special edition, Prosperity Report edition of the Daily Mastermind. My name is George Wright III. I'm your host, and today I want to talk to you about secrets and strategies of ultra-high net worth investors and business owners. And this is a topic that I've been wanting to do for a while, so I'm super excited to provide you this incredible masterclass training. It's from a very recognized speaker, attorney, friend I've known for over 20 years. And it's going to be on the topics of asset protection, tax reduction, and estate planning. Now, Bob Bloom, he's an attorney and speaker that I've worked with, like I said, for over 20 years, and he's a recognized leader in the education and strategies, to help you slash your taxes and, to protect yourself from lawsuits. Trust me when I say lawsuits are a huge problem in the U.S. and all over the world, and they're going to become an even bigger problem as people have more desperation and fear. And it's something that you need to keep in mind. So let me give you a little bit of background on Bob. Now, as a national speaker and leader in asset protection, he specialized in creating legal frameworks designed to give business owners and investors peace of mind in today's litigious society. Bob creates customized business structures tailored to the investing goals of each individual client. So he creates entities that maximize tax advantages and protect against lawsuits and litigation. In his 30 years as an attorney, he's actually practicing, right? Bob has had the opportunity to serve as a trial lawyer, an author, and a speaker. In the courtroom, he's represented companies of all sizes, from Fortune 500 to privately held. And as a speaker, he's shared the stages and many events with myself, where he shared the stages with Margaret Thatcher, Gorbachev, President Clinton, and Bush. He's been a guest lecturer on all kinds of different stages with everything from Jim Cramer, David Bach, Gene Chatsky, Susie Orman, Donald Trump. I mean, the list goes on and on. So I want you to listen to this special edition report. It's longer than normal, but it's about 40 minutes, and I hope you'll learn a ton of information while gaining some insight on what to take action on immediately. And what I want to do is I want to incentivize you to listen all the way through. I think this content is so important that at the end of this podcast, I have a special gift for you. When you listen to the end, I'll have this special gift for you, some additional information and content that you are going to absolutely love. So look forward to talking with you again at the end of this. Have an amazing day. And this is George Wright III. We'll talk to you soon.
I've been asked to speak today on asset protection for business owners and real estate investors. And whether you are or are not a business owner or real estate investor, this applies to everybody because of what our current situation is with the COVID-19 pandemic. So I think you're going to find it very timely. Just a little bit about me very quickly. I've been a lawyer for a long time, since 1985. I started out in a 1,000-lawyer law firm with law offices all over the world, doing litigation. I was suing people for a living. I then found a 12-step program and I quit. But I also represented an international oil company, which is now merged with British Petroleum, and it represented the world's largest airline as well. As I mentioned, I'm a former trial lawyer, but now in the last 15, 20 years of my career, I've been practicing asset protection, which basically means this. I've taken everything I learned suing people, and now I use it to protect people from a lawyer like I used to be. So in other words, I know all the things that the trial lawyers are going to try to do to sue you, take your money, and now I know much better how to protect you. And so I work extensively with real estate investors and business owners. So I want to frame it like this. Whatever you do to make money, whether it's your job, whether it's a business, whether it's real estate, whatever you do to make money, we call that offense, because you're trying to score. And I know everybody here loves offense. Take a look at this.
They are good enough to go undefeated. Will they? If they put the hammer down, they could do it.
For years, the Colts had what many felt was the perfect offense.
Touchdown, 80 yards!
Folks, I know everybody loves offense. It's the fun, exciting part of the game. But a lot of people make a big mistake and think, well, yeah, that's all there is to it. I just got to make more money and all my problems are going to be over. I know you're smarter than that, because you know that offense is a very important part of the game, but it's only half the game. The other half of the game is called defense, and take a look at this.
Here's the give to Jerome. He has it to the ball is bumping. And the Colts pick it up. Look out. Nick Harper has it. He's running. And Big Ben can't. He tackles him at the 40.
So, folks, that is defense. And you are going to have a defense every bit as good as your offense, or you do not win this game. You're just in the game and getting beat. So what do we need to do to protect ourselves? Well, what are we going to protect ourselves from in the first place? And the first answer is we need to know how to slash our income taxes to the bare legal minimum, because income taxes are one of the very biggest places your money goes. And so we're going to learn how to cut our taxes. Now, to do that, we're going to follow the rules. Congress makes the rules, and Congress has said for us to pay the bare legal minimum in income taxes, we're going to have to do three simple things. Now, the first requirement is you must own a business. Why is that? Because business owners get the vast majority of tax deductions in the tax code, while non-business owners get very few. So that's where the deductions are, and deductions are where you pay nothing in income taxes. If you have, $1,000 of business expenses, you don't pay tax on that $1,000 of business expense. All right. Now, once we decide, yes, I've got a business or I'm going to have a business, now the question becomes, what business structure is going to be able to cut your taxes better than any other? And there are many, many ways we could run a business in our country today, but only one of these will give you all the tax deductions and all the goodies in the law, and it is called a limited liability company, or an LLC. And that is true, but only if it is taxed correctly. Now, I'm going to explain what I mean by if it's taxed correctly, but before I go there, I want to mention one thing. There was a sole proprietor as a possible way to run a business. And I want to make something really clear. You never, ever want to do business as a sole proprietor. Why? Because a sole proprietorship means that you are the business. When they sue the business, they're actually suing you, and they can take your personal assets. Terrible. There's no lawsuit protection as a sole proprietor. Furthermore, you get the fewest deductions, and even worse, you have by far the highest audit risk with the IRS. So simply take my word for it. Never, ever do business as a corporation. If you're going to do business, we want to use a business entity, which is typically either a corporation, a limited partnership, or a limited liability company. Now, a properly structured limited liability company can do wonderful things. It can lower your taxes to the bare legal minimum. It can protect you beautifully from lawsuits, and it can protect you from IRS audits as well as anything else can do. Now, what that means is in order to pay the bare legal minimum in income taxes, we have to satisfy the second of these three requirements, and that is we want to run our business as a limited liability company with the correct tax method. Now, I want to make something clear. I don't have in mind that there is a correct tax method for everybody and it's all the same. It's different for everyone. So let me explain quickly. Before we go there, I want to mention that the 2018 tax cuts were designed specifically with you in mind if you own a small business or are a real estate investor. Real estate investors and business owners are the big winners because owners of what are called pass-through entities get an automatic 20% tax cut, or tax deduction, if you will. Pass-through entities are most LLCs, S corporations, and family limited partnerships. C corporations are not pass-through entities, but owners of a C corporation get a tax cut under this tax law, and the rate drops from 35% all the way down to 21%. So there is a time and a place when you may want to use a C corporation. But getting back to what we're talking about, we want to get deductions. And here's just one category of deductions. These are IRS-approved medical deductions, which are available to you with the right tax method with an LLC. All right, now, want to compare corporations and limited liability companies to understand what I mean by this correct tax method. A corporation has two choices of how it could be taxed. It could be taxed as an S corporation or as a C corporation. Limited liability companies, on the other hand, have four possible ways they could be taxed. It could be taxed as an S corp, LLC could be taxed as a C Corp. It could be taxed as a sole proprietorship, or the LLC could be taxed as a partnership. Any one of those four you may choose. Now, there are different deductions depending upon which one you choose. I want to mention one more thing. Once again, the C Corporation is not a pass-through entity. There's no 20% automatic tax deduction, but the others in green are pass-through entities with an automatic 20% tax deduction. S Corps are great. Sole proprietorships, a word about that, many, many disadvantages. You do not want to have an LLC which is taxed as a sole proprietorship. Why? Well, you get the fewest deductions, you have the highest audit risk with the IRS all over again, and you have zero liability protection in 45 out of the 50 states. So, folks, do not use a limited liability company with a sole proprietorship or disregarded entity status. All right? Now, partnership taxation is one way you could choose the LLC to be taxed. And it does have many advantages. It's a pass-through entity, so you get 20% tax cut. Passive members pay 15.3% less in tax, which is the self-employment tax. And you can allocate losses and gains to your members as you choose. So the partnership taxation has the greatest tax flexibility and many, many advantages. The reality is most LLCs are taxed as a partnership, but again, that doesn't mean that you should be taxed as a partnership. You should consult with an expert who can help you, whether you're CPA or an attorney who can help you decide what would be best in your case. Now, once again, a limited liability company has two fantastic advantages, and one is the best possible tax savings because, once again, of its tax flexibility. And second of all, it gives you excellent lawsuit protection, which we're going to talk about in just a minute. Now, before we go there, I want to mention this. Limited liability companies are not all the same. There are probably 15 or 16 different types or variations on limited liability companies. One of those is called a single member LLC. And I want to caution you, do not do business as a single member LLC. Now, they must be used very, very carefully. There are many disadvantages and pitfalls. If you do not know what you're doing, I want you to understand professionals who know what they're doing will put you into a single member LLC, but with a particular structure in mind. So we want to use instead multi-member LLCs. And once we have a multi-member LLC, we now need to decide, is it going to be manager managed or member managed? That has consequences tax-wise. So once again, a limited liability company has two great advantages: excellent tax savings and excellent lawsuit protection. Now, that is how we're going to be able to cut our taxes to the bare legal minimum, by satisfying these three simple requirements. First of all, we want to have a business. Second of all, we want to use an LLC business structure and then choose the correct tax method out of those four possibilities. And finally, we must have certain key words drafted into our company documents. Those key words would be typically found in a limited liability company operating agreement for tax reduction and limited and liability protection. If you have a corporation, it would typically be in the bylaws, the minutes, and the resolutions. So very careful drafting must be done with protective language in order to get the liability, the protections from taxes that we're talking about. All right. Now, we've gone through a lot of things. It may be a bit confusing, but I want to mention this. You must have a plan for your money. You must know, if you're going to make the money, how much you're going to have to pay in taxes. Because if you don't have a plan for your money, you know who does have a plan for your money, and you're not going to like that plan. All right. So let's assume that you get it. You've got a business. You say, if I don't have an LLC now, I'm going to go get one, or maybe a corporation. I've got the ball. I'm going for the goal. We are going to score.
Pittsburgh seemed lost without him.
To play in overtime, pressure coming. Maddox turns and throws. It's intercepted. Rasheed Mathis has got it. Touchdown, Jaguars! They beat the Steelers.
Folks, they took your ball. Can they do that? Well, yeah, because if you play this game without a good enough defense, can somebody sue you and take your money? And the answer is yes, they can. Now, want to mention certain facts that are absolutely relevant to our moment in time right now. With the COVID-19 virus pandemic, the unemployment rate in the U.S. is now estimated to be 13%, which is the highest since the Great Depression in the 1930s. Over 10 million people filed for unemployment over the last couple of weeks. That is 20 times the normal rate of filings. 31% of renters did not pay their April rent on time, which is up from 18% just a year ago. Only 4% of landlords have rent default insurance. And the CARES Act, which Congress recently passed, the multi-trillion-dollar act, it says that currently the mortgage forbearance program allows pauses on federally backed mortgages only. So the problem we're seeing is this. We want to draw on lessons that we learned from the 2008 financial crisis that can now be applied to the COVID-19 induced recession in 2020. Now, we're not yet in recession because that takes 2 consecutive quarters of negative growth, but we're going there. We're headed there unless some fantastic miracle occurs. So what lessons can we learn? Well, here's what happens. In a recession, business revenues decline. Why? People are laid off. They don't have money. They cut back on their spending. That means that if you're a landlord, for instance, you're not being paid the rents. How are you going to make your payments to the bank, on the loans? So we typically see greater and greater defaults on loans or lease payments. If you're a business owner and leasing some commercial space, often those loans are backed by personal guarantees, which means your personal assets are now at risk. And things are quiet now, but eventually this virus threat is going to be over, and the news media will move on to other topics, and then all of a sudden lenders are going to start remembering, hey, that guy owes me money. I need to get my money. And so the good news is this lag time gives you time to prepare for what is almost certainly coming down the pike. So what we learned from the 2008 financial crisis is you need to take action to protect yourself before you default on any loans or obligations. And then second of all, the earlier you act to protect your assets, the higher your likelihood of success. Sticking our heads in the sand and hoping this is going to go away is not going to serve you well. All right? So what asset protection means is you no longer own the asset. Now you may get a little worried about that. What? Oh, that's my asset. No. A creditor can only seize what you own. So if we move the ownership of the asset from you to an entity, you will not own the asset anymore, but you control the asset. So this is where the phrase comes, own nothing but control everything. So we do this by using protective entities, and these are trusts, and there are hundreds of different kinds of trusts. Corporations, which are 2 kinds, S corps and C corps. Limited liability companies, there are 16 different variations, 16 different types of LLCs, and of course, limited partnerships and more other more sophisticated tools as well. So we want to be using entities to protect ourselves from lawsuits. Now, going back to this idea that they can only take what you own, if you have defaulted or you are likely to default because of falling revenues, it is critically important that these assets not show up in your name. And the reason is when the plaintiff decides to sue, before they sue, they will actually do what's called an asset search. This is a typical site. There are hundreds of these sites. Here's a typical assignment. It says this site provides detailed financial information to assist attorneys and clients in determining the economic viability of litigation. That means, in plain English, how much can we get from you when we sue and win, right? It goes on to say we identify assets in over 200 countries of the world. We identify your bank accounts, brokerage accounts, real property, vehicles, watercraft, aircraft, business affiliations, and other valuable assets to satisfy judgments. So if you own it in your name, I guarantee they're going to find it, all right? Now, once they see you have some assets, they want to know, well, how many assets? What's this guy really worth? This next site is a different site, but it tells them every piece of real estate you own, when you bought it, what you paid for it. It'll find all your buddies from jail, every place you ever lived, your social security information, your current address. And now that they have your current address, they can go to a free website and find the county appraised value of your home. Now, the reason they want to know what your home might be worth is so they can calculate how much equity you have in your home. The reason they want to know how much equity you have, they can take your home in a lawsuit typically, sell it, and put the equity in their pocket. That's how they can recover. This next site gives them a real property equity assessment because this is all public record. Now, it's always been public record, but the difference between today and say 30 or 40 years ago is in the past, they had to go to this office or that office, the next county over, the next state over. It took too much time and money. They had to look through things manually. They didn't do it. But today, with a few clicks of a mouse, they're going to know more about your finances than typically you do. If you're feeling a little bit vulnerable, you should be, because it's all out there. So how do we protect ourselves? We get these assets out of our name and into protective entities. That way, when they sue you because you're a personal guarantor on a loan, or you've breached the lease or breached a contract, now they sue you, you own nothing, and they can now get nothing. That's the goal. Now, the sad thing about the state of our legal system today is the fact that you can now be sued even though you have done nothing wrong. And I know that doesn't sound right, doesn't sound fair, but it is the case. Let me give you some examples. Well, an example of a very common type of lawsuit is divorce. It is now called no-fault divorce, meaning that nobody in court has to prove, the husband, the wife doesn't have to prove that the other party did something wrong. They want a divorce, they get a divorce. Nobody did anything wrong, and yet you didn't do anything wrong, and here you are in this divorce action. Second of all, if you have one person working for you in your business and they do something wrong, you can now be sued for what your employee does wrong, not you. Another way people get sued is because somebody gets injured on property you own. Folks, it doesn't matter if you put up beware the dog signs, no trespassing signs, if they are on your property, even trying to rob you, even trying to do something bad to you, if they get injured on your property, you can very well be liable for that injury. Now, a fourth way people get sued is because they own their assets in joint ownership. This is a very common form of joint ownership. There are many ways you can own it that way, joint tenancy. There used to be nothing wrong with you owning your assets with your spouse or a parent, a child, a sibling, a friend. Nothing wrong with that until June 26, 1985, when the U.S. Supreme Court ruled that if you have a joint owner who does something wrong, you can now lose every asset you own jointly with them, even though you did nothing wrong. The rule for our clients is get out of joint ownership. There are much safer ways for two or more people to own an asset. I'll show you that in a minute. A fifth way people get sued is because you may be doing business as a general partnership. This is a very common way people do business. It's a handshake. They decide, you know, I like you. It's a business idea. Let's put our resources together and start a business. Folks, that can be deadly to you financially because you can now go broke for what your partner does wrong. Not you, what someone else does wrong. A sixth big way people get sued is if you have a corporation and you are an officer or director of the corporation, you can now be sued personally for what the company has done wrong. A seventh way people get sued is the documents may say you're not officially an officer of the company, but you look like an officer of the company. Busy people will typically turn to their spouse, their partner, and say, you know, I'm so busy making the money. Would you mind just keeping the books? And then sooner or later, that spouse or partner is signing the checks to the bank, the this, the that, and now to the outside world, that spouse looks just like the secretary treasurer. And if you look like an officer, the court says you are constructively an officer. An eighth big way people get sued is because you are the owner of an asset, and that alone can be unbelievably dangerous. Now, here's an example. Imagine for a moment you are the parent of a teenage driver, just starting to learn how to drive. They cannot own anything legally until they reach a certain age, a couple of years away, so the car they start out driving is titled in mom and dad's name. Son or daughter gets into an accident, and the person who gets sued is mom and dad. Why? Well, because, now listen, you didn't do anything wrong. You weren't in the car. You weren't driving. You get sued because your name is simply on the title, and the law assumes that if you own the car, you control who you allowed to drive the car. And because you allowed a negligent driver to drive your car, the liable party is really you. So think hard about what titles you have your name on right now. Typically our vehicles, our homes, our bank accounts, our savings, our investments. And if you're really doing it badly, investment real estate is titled in your name. And folks, for every one of those assets, when you're sued personally, what can you lose? Everything. So the rule for our clients is do not own assets in your name, own them in a protective entity. We'll get to that in a moment. Breach of contract is another very big way people get sued. And we have a certain way to teach you how to sign documents so you are not liable for breach of contract. A 10th and final way people get sued is because, yes, they had insurance, but the insurance company decides to decline coverage. Insurance companies love to collect premiums. If there's any way they don't have to cover the loss, they will take it. Somebody once said, insurance is a little bit like a hospital gown. You only think you're covered. So, folks, once again, you want to have insurance, but more importantly, you want to have a protective entity. So in the event the insurance fails, you are still protected. Now, the problem is not one of the people on this list had done anything wrong themselves, and yet every one of these people were sued. And the question is, why were they sued? Having done nothing wrong, and the answer is vicarious liability, which basically means that you can be sued for what someone else does wrong. Now, the way we protect against vicarious liability, against lawsuits that threaten your personal assets, is we move those assets into a protective entity. Just to give you an example, here is a little story. This woman was a prolific real estate investor. She said, my husband was involved in an auto accident that killed one man and injured another. The second man sustained injuries that cost over $1 million in medical bills. I was sued for everything I had. Why? She said, I hadn't done anything wrong except for owning a Lincoln Town Car in joint ownership. I was being sued for millions and my entire estate was at stake. I'll give you the resolution of that in just a little bit, but here's the question. Does that seem fair to you? She's not even in the car. She's not driving. Her husband does something wrong. She gets sued. He got sued too, by the way, but she's the one with all the money. Does that seem fair? And the answer to me is no. Well, the way we protect our clients and keep them off of a list like you just saw is to use what is called a lawsuit protection entity. Folks, if you do not have a lawsuit protection entity protecting you, your assets, and your family in the kind of environment we're in today, you are missing out. You need that protective entity. Now, we're going to talk about a lawsuit protection entity, but before we go there, I got to talk to you about a very important tool many of you have heard about. It's poorly understood. It is called a living trust, sometimes called a revocable living trust. What does it do? It protects your family from probate. When all of us pass away, and by the way, none of us are getting out of this alive, but when we pass away, our estate will go through probate if all we have is what is called a will. Wills take you to probate. And probate is a process that occurs in court with lawyers and judges. And that means it is slow, it's expensive, and it produces a public record. Most people want to avoid that. And so they use a living trust, and that protects their family from probate. Instead of the kids having to wait for maybe months or years to inherit assets, they can inherit within hours after you pass. Now, living trusts are a wonderful tool for that reason. However, I want everyone to understand that a living trust does not protect your assets from a lawsuit. It protects against probate. Now, the way it protects against probate is simple. We set up a living trust, and then we fund it. We put our assets into it that we don't want to go through probate. We put our home in a living trust, our savings, our stocks, our bonds, mutual funds, our real estate, our rental properties. Everything we own goes into a living trust, and we are set up to protect against probate. But we are also set up to go broke, because if just one lawsuit strikes, set up this way, it can have a ripple effect, a domino effect against every other asset in that living trust. It takes them down in flames, and we lose it all. An entire lifetime of work can be destroyed because we failed to understand that the living trust was never designed to protect our assets from a lawsuit. It is designed to protect our family from probate. So what do we do? Well, yes, we still use a living trust, but we also use a lawsuit protection entity to protect from lawsuits. So, folks, I hope you've been taking good notes up to now, but if you have not been, take careful notes for the next few minutes. You must understand what I'm about to say. Now, a lawsuit protection entity consists of two very important tools. One is a family limited partnership, and the other is a limited liability company. I'm going to talk primarily about the family limited partnership. Most of you are somewhat familiar with an LLC. Family limited partnerships are found in our laws under Section 704 of the Internal Revenue Code. They are nothing new. They have been around since 1916, and that means this is bedrock solid asset protection law. It's not about to be changed or go away. Now, in every limited partnership, there is a general partner and a limited partner. The general partner has 100% control, so that's typically you and your spouse. Limited partners are often the kids or grandkids. Now, it doesn't have to be that way. That's just some ways it's set up. Because you have 100% control, we can make a corporation or a limited liability company be the general partner, which also gives you better liability protection. But the limited partner can be a corporation, it could be a living trust, it could be another LLC, it could be anybody at all. So whether you have kids, family, you do, you don't, everyone here can have a family limited partnership. All right. Now, for the limited partnership to protect us, we've got to set it up first and then put our assets into it. Let's take a simple asset we all own, a savings or checking account. Now, let's just compare for a moment. If you own your life savings just in your name and someone sues you, they can take your money. If you own your life savings in joint ownership and they sue your joint owner, they can take your money. If you own your life savings in a living trust and they sue you, they can take your money. So if you don't want someone taking your money, we put our savings and checking account in a family limited partnership, and our stocks, bonds, mutual funds, T-bills, CDs, money market accounts, they are now protected by your family limited partnership. So when someone sues you, they get nothing, and you have protected every dime of your life savings. Now, what about real estate? Those of you who own investment real estate, I want to tell you a quick story. I ran into a guy the other day, and he said, I own 25 single family homes. What do you think of that? And I said, that's good. How do you own them? He said, just in my name. But he said, here's my problem. The other day, the police raided one of my homes. He said, it turned out one of my renters was running a meth lab in the back bedroom. He said, if this dirtbag sold this junk to some kid and hurt a kid, could they sue me? And the answer is, you bet they can sue him. And when they sue him, what do you think they can take? everything. They can take his home, his vehicles, his life savings, his rental properties, and the reason is he had all of his eggs in one basket. And that is the worst possible way we could own our assets. So instead, I want to give you rule number one, very important rule. Please write it down. If you own rental property or you plan to, it is never own investment real estate in your name. Instead, we own that investment real estate in a limited liability company. It is ideal for real estate. And now, if you are sued personally, they cannot touch the real estate in the LLC. You don't own it. The LLC owns the real estate. Now, what else do we put in a limited liability company? We put business assets. If you have intellectual property, you have physical assets such as trucks or other types of assets, they are protected in a limited liability company. So what do we put in a family limited partnership? Well, non-business assets. We'll put, once again, personal property here, savings, trading accounts. Why? Well, because those are personal assets. If you are sued personally, now they're protected. If the business is sued, the limited liability companies protect business assets, the family limited partnerships protects personal assets. And now the good news is, because we have separated business from personal assets, we do not have all of our eggs in one basket. We are much more protected than this. All right? Now, why does this protect us so much better? Because of something called a charging order. The charging order basically is the protective element of a limited liability company and family limited partnership. Here's what it does. It gives the winner of a lawsuit 3 migraine headaches. Now, headache number one, I want you to imagine this. Let's just imagine you have, say, $1 million worth of assets in a limited liability company. Somehow you get sued, and you own, of course, the limited liability company. You're a member of the LLC, but you get sued for $1 million, and the good news is they cannot take any assets in the LLC. In other words, they cannot touch the $1 million worth of assets to pay the judgment against you personally. They are protected. They get 0 assets. Now, the second thing, though, they get is the right to seize a certain percentage of the income that you distribute from your limited partnership. I'm going to say it again if you're taking notes. They can take the net income of the partnership that you distribute. Now, that means they've sued you for $1 million. They've won. You owe $1 million. You have $1 million worth of assets in the LLC, but you're getting, let's say, $100,000 payout every year from the LLC. Well, the plaintiff, the winner of the lawsuit, now has the right to step into your shoes and intercept that $100,000, and they can do that for the next 10 years until they are all paid their $1 million. That's a terrible result. And that is when good lawyers go to work around a bad result. So I'm going to read to you from the limited partnership documents that my partners and I have perfected over many years. It's been called the most protective limited partnership ever drafted. Listen carefully, then you tell me how much of your income you will ever be forced to give to someone who sues you. It says, the general partner, which is you, shall distribute the net income of the partnership to each partner every year, except the general partner does not have to distribute income if the general partner decides not to distribute any income, which means that the winner of the lawsuit now gets 0 income. Now, you may be wondering, yeah, but how do I get my money? There are many, many other ways you will get the $100,000, but we will simply not call it a distribution. Now, they get no assets, they get none of your income. I want to ask you this. Why would somebody sue you if the law says they get no assets and no income? And the short answer is there's no incentive for them to sue you now. Isn't this a great way to protect yourself in the first place? Why would anybody be interested in suing you if they can't get anything? And they can't. Okay, there's even a better incentive or disincentive for them to sue. And it's number 3. In the year 1977, the IRS issued one of the most famous revenue rulings of all time. And in this revenue ruling, the IRS said this: we don't care that the winner of the lawsuit was entitled to get $1 million from you, but they couldn't figure out how to get it. We don't care. But even though the winner of the lawsuit got nothing from you, the winner of the lawsuit will still get a tax bill on income you never gave them. Folks, did you hear that? By having the right type of entity with a charging order, the winner of the lawsuit gets none of your assets, they get none of your income, but instead of getting assets or income, they will get a tax bill on the $1 million of income you never gave them. Who in their right minds will ever want to sue you when that is what they get for winning the lawsuit? Now, I want to emphasize something. A charging order is the remedy for both a family limited partnership and a limited liability company. Now, want to just cover a few last things. Remember this story about the woman whose husband was involved in an auto accident? He killed somebody, injured another. Second person had medical bills over $1 million, and the woman, the wife, was sued for everything she had. She said she hadn't done anything wrong except she owned a Lincoln Town Car in joint ownership with her husband. She was being sued for millions. Her entire estate was at stake. Here's the good news. She said, after the plaintiff's attorney received copies of my limited partnerships, I didn't have to pay them anything. Your structuring saved me over $3 million plus my entire real estate career. I will always be grateful. That is the result you want. Folks, another guy said, after your talk, I got a family limited partnership. I later received some defective product from a supplier and refused to pay. The supplier sued me. He said, as soon as they found out my assets were protected, they dropped the suit and walked away. That's, once again, the result you want. So you can keep focused on your business instead of trying to win a lawsuit. Just make it go away. Don't give them a reason to sue you. One last guy had a little different take on this. He said, excellent. I had no idea that I could protect my assets and screw a lawyer at the same time. Folks, what we have done in order to help you get better protected is we have put together a set of materials with simple fill-in-the-blank forms to create these protective entities. Give you an idea of how they work. We put a little number beside each blank line, and we give you a set of instructions on what goes there. Just as an example, line 1 says, what is your name? Second, what is the day, the month, the year? Tell me if I'm losing anybody here, all right? Number 5, what is your name? Name of your state, name of your county. Folks, you fill in a few blank lines with simple information like this, and you can protect yourself, your family, and the legacy you choose to leave for your family. Another person said this: my mother's health was failing, and she was not expected to live through the weekend. It happened to be Memorial Day weekend. It was a Friday. They called their attorney. He said, well, I've got plans. He wouldn't help us because he had plans over Memorial Day weekend. So we decided to do it ourselves using your forms. Within 2 hours, we had created, funded, and notarized the trust. We legally avoided probate on her entire estate. And that is how it can be done. Another from a Florida plastic surgeon, he said, my wife and I decided to use your kit to protect our assets. We dedicated 2 hours every Saturday for 4 weeks. We completed a corporation, 2 limited partnerships, and our living trust. Your forms provided everything we needed. We figured we saved over $25,000 in legal fees, and that is not an exaggeration. So, I'll give you an idea of what we have. The reality is this, folks: all of us own assets. Most of us want to own more. The question is, how are we going to own those assets? And that's key, because if you build a great structure on a bad foundation, you know what's going to happen. It's going to collapse around you. So we've got to be very careful about how we decide we're going to own these assets. You could own them in joint ownership or your name or a living trust. That's what most people do. And it's all legal, but it's just not very wise, because if you own everything in joint ownership, don't you have all of your eggs in one basket? And when someone sues, they can take it all. You put everything in your name, somebody sues, they can take it all. You put it all in a living trust, somebody sues, and boom, it's gone. So instead, we want to own our assets in a limited partnership, limited liability company, maybe a combination of the two. Now, when someone sues, look at what they get. None of your assets, none of your income, and instead they get a tax bill on income you never gave them. That is a lawsuit protection entity. Now, ask yourself the answers to these questions. If you want to protect your assets, we set up a family limited partnership or a limited liability company. If we want to eliminate probate, we're going to set up a living trust. And if we want to pay the least in income taxes that the legal minimum allows us, we're going to set up a limited liability company or a corporation, which is taxed the best way possible for your particular business. So these are your major defensive tools. And if we had a legal structure that looked something like this, this would protect you much better than having all of your eggs in one basket. I think you'll agree. And if we had a legal structure like this, from a tax standpoint, this would allow you to pay lower income taxes, lower self-employment tax, and zero probate expense. So, folks, this is why we use these tools, and we use them in combination. Now, the good news is this: you have an opportunity to sort of inventory what you have, what your liabilities are, and ask yourself this important question: are you protected? And if the answer is no, moving into this COVID-19 induced recession where it's going to get ugly, you have got to make sure you are protected.
Well, I hope you've enjoyed that powerful message from Bob Bloom. He's an amazing educator and a proven attorney on these concepts and strategies. The bottom line is this. This is very, very important information. You need to have a plan for asset protection, for estate planning, and for tax reduction. You know, look, the safest, the easiest, the simplest, the fastest way that you can increase your net worth is to keep more of your tax money. It's to keep yourself from having to, cover and protect yourself in lawsuits. This is huge. Take action on these concepts, mastermind community. I'm telling you, it's something that you're gonna be very happy that you did. So to help you to do this, I have, as promised, a free gift for you, along with all my friends and partners at Protect Wealth Academy. I have a free ebook for you. Now, this isn't a typical small, worthless ebook like you get on the internet. This book is 46 pages. It's completely packed with content, and it'll help you to learn how to protect your personal residence, protect your small business, protect your brokerage account, protect your rental properties, your retirement accounts, and a ton of other information. It's a very, very solid piece of content, and I want to give it to you for free. But here's what I want you to do. If you want a copy of this asset protection book, it's 46 pages. I want you to send me an email personally. I'm not going to make this easy for people to do. If you will email me personally, I'm going to give you my personal email address. Then I'm going to take time and I'm going to send this out to you. I'm not going to put together a marketing funnel where people can just opt in with their email addresses. Take a few minutes, and if you're willing, if you listen to this Prosperity Report edition on these strategies and you take action, you send me an email at george@g3worldwide.com. George, that's George at G3worldwide.com. George@G3worldwide.com. I will send you back a copy of this with a note. Thank you for listening to the show. And yes, I'm going to personally send it back to you. I hope this is something that's going to help you. But if you'll take action, you'll do that. I promise you, you will be glad you got this information. It's amazing information. There's nothing in it that sells you anything. It's just content packed for asset protection, estate planning, and tax reduction. Anyway, that's the message for today. I hope you got a lot out of this. I hope you take action on it. And I hope you'll refer this podcast to other people that you feel can benefit from it. It would mean the world to me. And I look forward to talking with you more tomorrow. Once again, this is George Wright III, and this has been the Daily Mastermind. Have an amazing day.